Hello YouTube, and welcome to my tutorial on how to use the shadow catcher feature in Blender Cycles. The idea behind this is to allow us to get our 3D objects to cast a shadow in your scene on an invisible object, so that when you export your render out as a PNG with alphas enabled, you will get this a nice shadow from your objects that you can see in here. That will stay on top of your intended background once you've put it into Photoshop, for example, in compositive software. In Photoshop, I have opened 4 images in which I use this method with various degrees of success. This fourth one right here is the last one that I did, and I left it on purpose with a lot of issues so that we can fix them in this video, but rather than using Photoshop to fix them, we will use Blender to get the job done. So let's begin. Also, before we begin, guys, I just wanted to let you know that our online shop for gifts for your family, for royalty pet portraits, and just for wall art is now open. And if you guys want to support my channel, you can head on over there and just purchase one of our products. If you live in the UK or the United States, we ship in both these countries. We basically do, for example, custom pet portraits where you can select a template, upload your photo of your pet, and we can then do the work and really, you know, add your pet into one of these templates that we do. So I hope you guys enjoyed them. As I said, if you want to support us, just please go over the website is in the description below, and let me know what you think. Thank you. So now that we're in Blender, I've got my elements here. I've got 2 frames. I've got this camera, which is a 3D scan, and then I've got my background. Now what I want to do is I want to put my background into well, an appropriate sort of angle so to speak, and then once I turn these around the way it should be, which I'm always getting wrong, like that. Now I've put my background the way I wanted it. I'm just going to press 0 on the keyboard since I do have a camera already in the scene over here, and as you can see I'm actually using, so I am on Blender Cycles activated, and I do have my options in here for scene light and scene world for this viewport shading, you know, for this method of shading. So I do have an HDRI as well in the scene, which I can show you right now. It's a studio, it's a studio HDRI off of HDRI Heaven. So this in particularity allows me to have nicer shadows overall, and now this is the node setup that I've got over here. So this is going to come into play when we want to actually capture the shadow the right way. So now I'm just going to go back into my camera view, and as you can see I've got these frames, but they're not actually aligned with this background because the background is flat. We obviously got to make the right angle, but there's no point in trying to adjust these frames according to the background yet, because it will never actually fit properly unless we you know, provide a method of accurately measuring how does this table from the background sort of come into play. So I'm just going to select this the background, and I've also this plane that I've added, and I'm going to press the slash key on the keyboard to just have these 2 selected. Now with that done, I want to bring my plane above like so, and now I can have a look and see where does it actually meet with the background, and you know, it's obviously going through it. So on the Z axis I can lift this plane like that. I'm just going to put it around here, and now I just want to start rotating upwards, so on the Y axis like that. And when I go, you know, when I can just have a look and see, I think that sort of like fits, because in essence that's where the table, you know, this wooden table on the background, that's where it's going, you know. So at that point I can now you know, press the backslash again, and I can see my objects. Now what I want to do is I want to take the background out of the scene for a bit, and I'm going to select this plane, and I'm going to go into its properties, and I've got this option over here in the visibility option where it says shadow catcher. When I activate that, it will, from this moment onward, it will capture the shadow of these 3 objects, or any object that gets near it. So if we would actually have a look here, you can't really see anything right now apart from a very, very small tint over there. That's obviously enough for now. It shouldn't really be a problem. What we want to do is we may want to push these a bit backwards like that until they sort of like go into the plane. So around that point. Now we're just going to go back into camera view and let's just have a look where the shading is sort of hitting the plane. We don't want them to be too high up from the plane, because that's when you create false shadows that just aren't going to look real. So I've just dropped them in there like that. I'm just going to look at this camera as well, and I'm going to lift, I'm going to bring it backwards. As you can see, the camera is actually going through the plane right now. Which is not what I want, and you can see the shadow forming, but it's very high, very low compared to where the camera is. So I'm just gonna bring that down on the z-axis till about that point, like that. And now I want the shadow from here, from the behind as well. So I'm just gonna go into this side view, but not, just a little bit. Bring the camera somewhere like that angle, just how the plane is angled as well. And now, when I bring the camera down, it should match up quite closely with the plane. And you can see here, right? Obviously, you need to do a lot of tweaking. Well, not a lot, but just do some tweaking to get that sorted the way you want it. Now, if we bring that background back, you can see how the scene sort of will look like. So I want to start rotating my frames a little bit, so I can rotate them like that. Just create a few more angles so it looks a bit more dynamic. But the problem that we're going to have now is that obviously they're not aligned properly anymore. So with this frame selected, if I in this camera view, if I press R and just go that way, from right to left, I can sort of position the frame like that. So maybe around that angle, and then I can select this other one as well and just again position it like that. You can see it's quite above the plane, so I'm just going to bring that down a bit more now, like somewhere around there. The camera, I think the camera is okay, but this is the angle, so this is not distortion or where the camera takes the shot from. This is how this would actually look realistically. From with a certain degree of error, I would say it's not perfect, but quite close to it now. Okay, so this is what we've got. Now the problem that we're facing is that the light that is coming into the scene is coming from there. So it's not actually coming from behind where we have this in the scene. So we're gonna have to fix that. So I want to go into the world settings for the shader settings. So shader editor, and then in the world tab. And over here I've got my landscape, well not landscape, but the HDRI, which is plugged into a environmental image texture. And I can use the mapping coordinates to move it from where it currently is, from over there to somewhere behind. So I'm just gonna I'm going to bring it a bit further down like that, and then I'm just gonna play with the rotation. As you can see, this is where the light will be now, somewhere around there. We can probably just bring it even more. I'm gonna go into camera view by pressing the zero on the keyboard, the numpad 0, and just sort of like play with the light a bit, just to understand where that is. So now it's right above. This is blocking, obstructing the light from hitting, but because we're not actually going to render it, as you can see, I've got it here disabled, so it's not going to render it, just in the viewport for now. I'm just going to take it out of the viewport entirely, actually, just because I want to see how this light falls on how the shadow is being formed. So now I'm just going to go into render mode, so we can have a look and see how the light actually falls on top. And as you can see, that's the shadow that we're going to get, which is not exactly ideal for the scene that I'm trying to do here, because I'm obviously wanting to I want the shadow to be quite nice over here, but I also want to have a visibility of these these art frames. So what I can do is I can bring in a light. Maybe we'll try with a point light. I'm just going to bring it over here and in front of these. I'm going to go over to the power and maybe increase that to 500 watts, which is obviously way too much. But I'm probably going to put it to around, let's say 100 watt. Let's just have a look. No, still not enough. And as you can see, it does create this sort of a shadow over there as well. So we may want to actually just increase the radius of that and then just go to 500 watts now and just have a look. I'm probably going to just bring it a bit further this way like that, but 500 watts is still probably too much. Let's try with a 200. Just going to press Ctrl S to save and just going to go back into render mode. So now we just want to see how that will look. It's very important that you test these things out with render on. Again, it's all about your computer and how good it reacts to just using cycles directly. Seems that right. Oh, right. I've got it in render pause, so nothing would be showing up. I've just pressed play now on it, and this is what we get. I mean, it's not too bad. Could potentially go to maybe, let's just try 1000 watts, which is obviously way too light. But then I'm just going to increase the radius a lot more, like that. And also I'm probably going to play with the rotation of this light as well on the HDRI and just see how I can bring that light to sort of get closer to the objects, maybe like that. So I think that should be okay. I think we're definitely just exposed a bit too much, so we may want to just increase, play with this value. So go to 0.7. Again, this is very dependent on the actual HDRI that you're using. So understand that this is going to make things, you're going to play with these settings to make them darker or brighter or whatnot. So I'm just going to press render with this, and then once we have our PNG, we're actually going to drop it over into Photoshop. So I'll see you guys just a second. So now that I'm in Photoshop, I'm going to embed my render that I've just made, which is up here. This is the embed screen. I'm just going to press enter on the keyboard, and this is our render. As you can see, the light itself isn't very strong, so we might actually need to bring a bit more light into the scene, into these objects. But the shadow, as you can see it over there, it sort of melds over. Now, one of the problems that we have is that the shadow is going over here and sort of shadowing this area on the bench, and that's because we haven't actually modeled that part. If we would have added in the plane another wall and just a loop running across and then just drag it down here, then that would be more accurate. But what we can do is we can bring these upwards a little bit, just so the shadow sort of cuts at that point over there on that edge, because there would be no reason for it to actually go any further down. It just wouldn't make any sense for it to go any further down. So we can just go down here, take an eraser, and then we can start editing the smart object, and it just becomes a normal just a normal layer. So at that point, I can just come in here and just add a bit of a, just use a eraser just to take the shadow off a bit from here, and that should clear our our image quite nicely. So one of the things to do in order to embed this image a bit more into the image, you can add a layer on top and just move that over to overlay. Make sure you press Alt on the keyboard and click the layer itself, which will then make the layer only affect the layer beneath it. And just take your bucket tool, sample and color from the image, something that's more neutral, something like that, and just drop it in on top. And you can see it's only affecting these this element, because this overlay is only affecting the layer underneath it. And just bring down the opacity. This is without, and this is with it. So just bring in the opacity a bit, just to bring these three elements more into the scene. Now obviously there's a lot more to it, a lot more tweaking that you need to do in order to get a proper render out of this, like for example, add some textures on this frame and whatnot. But overall, this is sort of like the result of the shadow catcher and what you get from it. Again, this is quite a good shadow to have, because it is relevant to the shape of your objects. And as long as you made this plane or whatever, you can actually even do couches this way. And actually, I do have an example. I can open a file that I made recently. Let me just have a look over into here. Yeah, I've got So let me just go in here and I'll just open one of these couches, and as you can see, this is actually a render that I did. So again, these cushions are 3D and they're dropped onto the sofa, and the shadow that they create is actually on a plane that I've created and just sort of modeled around the sofa in order for it to capture the shadows for, you know, that they would go on top of the sofa itself. So I hope you guys found that useful, and I hope that you understand you know, how the shadow catcher works a bit more now. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below. I always answer all the comments that you guys leave, and I do want to give you back, you know, some information if I can, and even learn some things along the way with you. So thank you for joining me, and I wish you a good one.